Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Sunday Chats with Nim. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that seems to be of great interest, and rightfully so, to a lot of people. And that topic is how to deal with sarcastic people. And I'm super excited to be sharing and exploring this topic with you all this afternoon because I've been thinking about it for a long time, and I've been wanting to write about it and explore it for many months, but I just didn't get around to it. So finally I decided that it was time to deal with this topic once and for all, and hopefully provide some strategies to all of you that will help you deal with the sarcastic people that surround you. Now, I may be surprised if you've never met a sarcastic person in your entire life, because I'm guessing that most of us have had to deal with some form of sarcasm, some form of mockery, some form of taunting at different stages in our lives from different people. So today's topic is how to deal with sarcastic people. We have between 20 to 30 minutes with each other. And I want to start by thanking you all for parking aside a few moments of your precious Sunday to spend with me. And I truly appreciate that. So hopefully the volume is okay. I've got the mic on. And if you can't hear me for whatever reason, please let me know ASAP so that I can fix any audio issues at the start of the session. And I would much appreciate, as always, if some kind soul would quickly type in the comments, audio is all well, because then I can begin without being afraid of not being heard. So while I'm waiting for everyone to log in, because I know a lot of people wrote to me and said that they're really interested in this topic, let me quickly remind you about the Sunday Chats competition that is currently underway for those of you who may have forgotten. So what is this competition? Basically, at the end of the first 12 episodes for 2019 of Sunday Chats, my team and I, we're going to go through and find out which people have been participating in a majority of the live sessions. And then we're going to put those names into a draw, and we're going to pull out one lucky winner. This is at the end of the first 12 episodes for this year. And the lucky winner wins two prizes. They win, firstly, a copy of my second book, Unlock the Real You, Strategies for Getting Ahead Personally and Professionally. And they also win a 1-hour one-on-one live coaching session with me. So to become eligible to go into the draw, basically all you need to do is to be as interactive as possible. And you can do that in a number of ways. You can do that by posting comments while the live chat is on, or by sharing your insights about the topic that is being explored, or by asking questions, whatever the case may be. And basically, it's pretty boring to sit behind a camera and talk just by yourself for 30 minutes. So which is why I encourage everyone to be interactive so that I don't feel quite as alone. Let's quickly check the comments. So we've got hi Vinita, welcome aboard. Thank you for joining in. Vandana, hi. Hope you're fine. Vandana from Perth, welcome. Vandana, audio is good, says Indrapreet. Thank you so much. And Vinita says audio is all well. And hi Rachna, thank you so much everyone. Hi Yogini, welcome, welcome. Cool, so I am going to share, as always, two quotes with you all. That's usually how I kick off the session. Today's two quotes, and I'm not sure who wrote them, definitely not me, but I really like them. And these quotes are, people will notice the change in your attitude towards them, but they won't notice their behavior, which made you change in the first place. Okay, so basically, and I love this quote, people will immediately be able to pick it up as soon as your behavior, your attitude towards them changes. They'll know something about you has changed, but unfortunately, they're not able to tell what it was about their own behavior, their own sarcastic taunts, repeatedly, months on end, years on end, that eventually made you turn into a completely different person. And the second quote I wanted to share with you is, when people are rude to you, it shows a lot about who they are as people. It doesn't reflect you as a person. So these are two main important things to remember before we dive into today's session for how to deal with sarcastic people. And I have something exciting in store for you. I'm going to do a little activity to bring home a few points. And excuse me, it's really warm here. I don't know what is happening. The air conditioning is on, and for some reason is not functioning at its best. But look, that's fine. So be it. All right. So now I know that most of you who are watching this have met sarcastic people at some point in your lives. And I am no different. Just like you, I've had to deal with many different types of sarcastic people. I've had to deal with the taunts, with the mockery, with the backhanded compliments throughout my life. And despite all that, I consider myself a fairly productive person. I'm very disciplined and I'm very focused about my work. And one of the biggest reasons for my productivity is that over the years I have developed a sound strategy to deal with the sarcastic people that I've had the misfortune perhaps, or the fortune, because they've taught me so much at different points in my life. And I'm going to share those strategies with you all today. I'm going to share my 3 top strategies for that. Before I do that though, I want to make a quick distinction here. I'm not going to be talking today about the good-natured banter that happens between friends. Okay, sometimes you'll find friends pulling each other's legs and being sarcastic and being funny and saying rude jokes about each other. I'm not talking about that kind of humor today, because typically, when friends like and trust each other, have known each other for a long time, they can get away with, some form of joking as long as it does not cross a line. So I'm not talking about that form of humor in today's session. I am going to talk about mainly the kind of nasty sarcasm that chips away at your confidence little by little over the years. Today we're going to talk about sarcastic people who are basically out to pull you down, or who are being nasty because they know no other way to be. So that's what we're going to concentrate on today. And before I actually talk about the strategies, I want to really explore why some people are sarcastic, because honestly there are some very, very different reasons why people can be sarcastic. So before I give you my viewpoint, let me bounce this question back to you so that I can make sure you're being interactive with me and I'm not the only one talking. Why do you think some people are so sarcastic on a regular basis? Does anyone want to have a go? Why are some people so sarcastic so often? I'll just wait for you to think of an answer, and of course I'm going to provide my viewpoint as well, but I would love to hear your perspective on this. Why do you think some people who are typically so sarcastic are sarcastic in the first place? What are their reasons? Anyone? I know you're not a quiet bunch. I know many of you do provide answers on a regular basis, so I'm waiting to hear from you. Vandana says, I feel they are unhappy. Yes, very true. A big reason why someone might resort to sarcasm. And Vinita says they are frustrated. Absolutely, I agree with you. Definitely. 2 good reasons we've received so far. Anyone else wants to have a go? Why do you think people are sarcastic in the first place? Okay, let me share while I wait for you to type, because I know there's a bit of a lag usually. Yogini has to say that they are frustrated, unhappy people. Yes, very true. Frustrated, unhappy, and Vinita says it's just them. Very true as well. Some people possibly are born that way, but there is hope. So if you've been feeling that it is you who is the sarcastic person, then you need to know that there is hope, and that it is a skill that you can unlearn. Okay, so it is something that you can move on from, you can overcome. So there is hope. You know, if you've been sarcastic all your life with the people around you and you feel that's just how you are, or that's just how you were born, or that's just how you are today because of your unhappy past or your unhappy childhood, I have good news for you. You can change. And Yogini says jealousy. Rachna says just their nature. Guneet says they want to grow ahead. Vinita says superiority complex. And Yogini says negative people. Fantastic. Well, thank you for being so interactive, and thank you for providing so much insight into why people are being sarcastic on a regular basis. And Mamta says jealousy. Yes, I agree with all your points. So let me just quickly give you my perspective, which of course covers a lot of what you've covered already. Sarcasm basically disguises some emotion. Often it is emotions like annoyance, irritation, displeasure, impatience, and largely insecurity. Okay? For example, if a person is annoyed or impatient with another person, they think that by using sarcasm as a tool, they're able to convey that displeasure, that annoyance to the other person without actually being direct, without actually getting into a confrontational situation. So it's almost like they're hiding behind this mask of sarcasm to get their emotion across, and it's usually a negative emotion. By doing so, they don't actually have to take responsibility for being direct with the person and telling them directly exactly what it is that is bothering them. And the biggest reason for sarcasm is insecurity. They're not feeling great about themselves. They want to pull someone else down to feel better. And when they're sarcastic, they actually chip away at the other person's confidence. The other person starts doubting themselves, and this gives them, the sarcastic person, a sense of power, a sense of control. It makes them feel as though they're superior to the other person because they've just made the other person feel completely worthless. Okay? They're not doing this consciously because many people are not aware that they're insecure people. But if you really think about it, the root cause for sarcasm very often is some form of insecurity that has not been looked into. Okay? And of course, another big reason why some people are sarcastic is because they genuinely think they are being super funny, and that they have absolutely no idea that their humor is actually crushing someone else's confidence, that it is crushing someone else's sense of self-esteem. And they have no idea about the damage they are unleashing by their humor. So these people, possibly the least dangerous because they don't really mean to put you down. They just think they're being really cool and funny. But unfortunately, they're ruining the relationships around them by their uncalled for humor. So I think if you're in the habit of constantly joking with your near and dear ones, maybe it's a good idea to pause every now and then and give them some clarity. Let them know that it's all harmless and you don't really mean anything bad. And if they don't like it, you just have to step back. Okay? So these are some of the common reasons why people are sarcastic. And now I'm going to give you some strategies. But before that, I'm doing something different today. I have a little experiment, a little activity that I'm going to share with you all. And it's called the self-worth activity. Okay? Because, friends, I find that no matter how many strategies I give you today, no matter how many strategies you learn from reading books, or you learn from reading or learn from attending seminars or confidence workshops or whatever, no matter what strategies you learn, and even if you learn to use them, and even if you get some benefit from them in the moment, in the short term, you will find yourself going home and feeling really bad about yourself. You will still feel crushed by what someone else said. And that is possibly because your self-confidence and your sense of self-worth is not at its optimal. So I find that even when people are able to use certain strategies if their foundation is not strong, if they haven't learned to love themselves, if they haven't learned to be at peace with who they are at that point in life. No matter what strategies they learn, it's not going to have a long-term benefit. And I am someone, as a coach, as a person who likes to get to the foundation. When you build a building, the foundation has to be strong. Otherwise, one puff of wind and that building collapses. So while I'm here to teach you and share with you my top 3 strategies for dealing with sarcastic people, I really need to address the elephant in the room, which is the fact that a lot of people don't love themselves. They're not super confident about who they are. They don't believe in themselves. And I want to get that right first before you can start using the strategies that I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to do a little experiment, just a little activity. And there are 3 things that are participating in this activity. First is this empty glass container, which is standing for you. This is you in this experiment, okay? This stands for you. The next thing in this experiment is some shells, which stand for your self-confidence or your sense of self-worth. And the last thing is some sand, which stands for all the insults, all the mocking comments, all the taunts that come your way. So these are the 3 things I'm going to use today to show to you the role that self-worth and self-confidence plays in your ability to handle all the annoying sarcastic people you will encounter in future. Okay? So like I said, this little empty glass is you. Now I find that us human beings, as default, we need to believe in someone. And if we don't believe in ourselves, if we don't have that sound foundation, we latch on to whoever it is around us who gives us their opinion about who we are. So their perception of us becomes our reality. So let's say you don't believe in yourself, you're completely empty, you don't have any self-faith, any self-belief, any self-confidence. And then you meet someone, could be your significant other, it could be a colleague, it could be a boss, it could be a best friend. Because you don't believe in yourself and you're completely empty, they come along, the sand stands for the insults, and they pour all their insults into you. Now you're filled with a lot of negativity, you're filled with the damage of their perception of who you are. You start believing them. Okay, that's when you start feeling bad when someone says something bad to you. That's when you feel insulted. That's when you feel like a victim. That's when you feel no one understands you. Okay, now let's look at it a different way. Let's say you've built your self-confidence and you are a confident person. So you've got all these shells which stand for self-esteem and self-worth. You are filled with self-belief. Your self-esteem is high. At this point, if you meet someone who comes along with their insults, we'll bring the sand again, and they try to insult you, of course, some of the sand will go in, but it's a lot harder to fill this container with this sand because it's already filled with the shells which stand for your confidence. So while there may be a little bit of damage, while you may feel just a little bad by what someone says to you, because your self-confidence is already there, you're already believing in yourself, it's a lot harder when the insults come your way for the insults to actually create any damage. Now for someone like me, for instance, because a long time ago I recognized what my strengths are, what my skills are, what I bring to the universe, what is special about what I have to offer. I find that now whenever I meet someone super sarcastic or super rude or super mocking, it doesn't have as big an impact on me because I believe in myself, right? So that was the point of that exercise, and I'm hoping, I just got this brainwave this morning and I thought let me give a practical demonstration of how self-worth works in this whole sarcasm game. So I hope you enjoyed that little side game that I wanted to share with you all. The importance of, while it's just a simple game, the point I'm trying to make to you is pretty deep. And that is, you really need to start building on your self-confidence first. And you do that by knowing what your strengths are. A lot of people I deal with have no idea what their skills are. They have no idea what they're good at. Whenever I ask people, make a list of your skills or make a list of your strengths, most people struggle because they have no idea. Whereas let's say someone were to ask me, Nim, what are you good at? I'm not going to hem and haw because I'm completely aware of what I have to offer. I know my skills and therefore I'm at peace with myself. I have a lot of flaws. I have a lot of things I don't do well, and of course I'm working on them to become a better person. But at the same time, there is no place for false humility. You really need to know what you're bringing to the table, and when you are constantly moving towards the person you were born to become, you find that the people around you who are mocking you or putting you down or trying to make you feel worthless are not able to unleash the damage that they want to on the scale they would have otherwise. Okay, so any questions so far before I dive into the strategies? How are we tracking for time? Okay, we've got another maybe 10 minutes. How's everyone doing? Does anyone have any questions? Did you enjoy that little game of the self-worth? So next time, remember, the seashells stand for your self-esteem and the self-confidence. The empty container is you, and the sand, the insults that come your way. Okay, so remember, fill yourself up with self-confidence first. That way, when someone starts being sarcastic to you, even if it's your boss or your colleague or your best friend or your in-laws or your spouse, you are much more prepared, you're better armed, you're armed with self-confidence. And honestly, if you've never tried it, you won't believe it, but take it from someone who knows. I used to be a completely underconfident person a long time ago, and everything anyone said would crush me. I would be thinking about it for a long time, and I would be upset, and I would be thinking, why does this always happen to me, and why am I so misunderstood, and I would start doubting myself. But once I realized that you need a sound foundation, once you believe in yourself and you come to terms with who you are and you recognize what it is that you have to offer to the world, it is so much easier to let those sarcastic comments just wash off you. Okay, so let's come down to how to deal with sarcasm. Now, I know that the easiest thing, and most people say, just ignore the sarcastic person. Fantastic advice, and yes, it works up to a point. You may have heard of that famous quote which says, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." All well and good. I don't quite believe in that quote, even though it's such a super famous quote, and I love it. I've grown up listening to it. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Like I said, it's a great quote, but with due respect to whoever first wrote it, I don't believe it 100% because I do believe that words have the power to hurt you, particularly if your self-confidence is not at an optimal level. That quote that I just shared with you starts becoming true when your self-confidence builds up to the level it needs to be at. That's when words cannot hurt you. But if your foundation is not strong, anyone and everyone's words will crush you. It'll chip away at your confidence until one fine day you'll wake up finding that you've turned into a completely different person, and a person that you don't quite like. So it's very important to build that self-confidence. So yes, the first strategy I would have shared typically is to ignore the sarcastic person. But all of you watching this show today know that, right? You know that it's smart to ignore someone. But there is a problem with constantly ignoring the sarcastic person. Because when you ignore, when you keep quiet, when you don't speak up, the other person can start seeing you as weak. They can start thinking that, you know what, they're a pushover, I can do this all the time, they don't seem to care. And then the behavior escalates and becomes worse and worse and worse. And because you've kept quiet for so long, you just think, I'll just continue doing it for the rest of my life. And the resentment builds up inside you until you become a bitter person. So while I say ignoring the sarcastic person is a good strategy, some of the time it is definitely not a good long-term strategy. Because sarcastic people, in a way, are bullies, and bullies need someone to stand up to them, because unless people speak up, They're going to do this all the time, and we're going to fill this beautiful universe with negativity and sarcasm. We need to distinguish between humor and sarcasm. Like they say, sarcasm is the lowest form of wit, and I agree with that. There's enough negativity in this world without us having sarcastic people bombarding us with taunts and mockery every day of our lives. We don't need that. But the reason these people abound, and the reason there are so many of them, is because they know no other way, and no one is actually speaking up to let them know that what they're doing is perhaps not helping the core relationships that they want to maintain. Okay, so yes, you can ignore the sarcastic person, but don't ignore them forever, because you're going to be the one suffering in the long term. The one big strategy I want to first share is what I wrote an article about recently, which is don't try to dig deep for the bigger meaning around a person's behavior. Now, some of you have read that post I put on social media a few days ago, which is a woman comes to me and says, well, this morning I said something. I asked my husband a really simple question, and he rolled his eyes when I asked him that question. And because he rolled his eyes, I asked him why did he roll his eyes, and that led to this massive argument which ruined my entire day. Now, the first question I asked this lady was, why did you need to know why he rolled his eyes? Now, she wasn't expecting this question from me. She was expecting me to sympathize, and of course I sympathized with her later. But first I needed to know, what was the big deal? He rolled his eyes. Okay, annoying. But still, why did you need to know the reason? Now, she actually couldn't come up with a proper answer. So she said, well, how dare he roll his eyes? Okay, that's a different point. But I still hadn't got the answer to my question. Why do you need to know? Now, this is the point I need to emphasize over here, my friends, that yes, it is annoying when someone laughs in a condescending manner at something you say. Yes, it is frustrating when someone rolls their eyes. Yes, it is frustrating when someone smirks or sniggers when you say something, when you ask a simple question. I agree with all that. It is super annoying. I get annoyed too. But what I want to encourage you to do is you don't need to know why they do that. You may want to know it, right? You're probably itching to know why they roll their eyes. You don't need to know. It's not important for your survival. So we really need to distinguish between things we want to know, which it would be nice to know, but which you actually need to know to move ahead. And you don't need to know why someone rolls their eyes, or why someone sniggers, or why someone gives you that condescending smile, which makes you feel really stupid. You don't need to know the reason behind it. Because when you dig that deep, you open a can of worms, and then things just blow out of proportion, and you can't bring the equation back to what it was. That's why people are not productive. That's why people are not achieving their goals. That's why people are not letting their businesses flourish, because they're spending all their time trying to interpret and translate every rolled eye and every text message. They're trying to read between the text, between the lines. You don't need to. Okay? So what I need to tell you first and foremost, the first strategy I want to share is, let some things just be. Let just people do what they're doing, unless and until they come right out and say something which you then have to defend or explain. Don't go out of your way to ask someone, well, why did you roll your eyes, or why did you use that tone, or why did you laugh in that manner? We don't need to know. Okay? I don't do that personally. If someone rolls their eyes at me, I don't need to know why. And I'm going to explain why we also itch to ask the other person this. Because deep down, we want to be liked. We want everyone to like us. We want to be popular. And we want to be given the opportunity to set the other person right if they have a wrong belief about us. So if they've rolled their eyes, that means they're unhappy with us. And we want the opportunity to get them to like us again. Not needed. Because like I always say, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be liked by every single person in the universe. And that's okay. Do you like every single person you meet? Of course not, right? So it's okay. You have to believe in yourself, and you've got to know that every single person is not going to like you. So that was my first strategy. Let's quickly read this question. Tejas says, how to make a sarcastic person realize that we are capable to respond, but we are not willing to waste time and energy. Tejas, great question. Again, it boils down to why do you need to explain to the other person that you are perfectly capable of responding if you wanted to, but you're choosing not to. Again, it boils down to our self-confidence. When I choose to walk away from a battle, I'm just giving you my own example because it's easy to give a personal example. When I choose to walk away from a battle, or when I choose to walk away from a sarcastic person who is taunting me or mocking me, I know deep within, see the shells? I know, because I'm a self-confident person, that I'm perfectly capable of giving a response that's equally toxic, equally hurtful if I wanted to, but I'm choosing not to. I have that self-confidence. I don't need that other person to be convinced as well. I don't need to, because their validation of me is not important. I know what I'm capable of. I don't need them to know. So we need to liberate ourselves from constantly trying to prove to the other person, hey, I know how to respond, but I'm choosing not to. No, as long as you know, and as long as nothing too big is at stake, right? As long as by walking away from that battle, you're not going to lose out on something that really matters to you. You don't need to let anyone else know who you are as a person. You need to know that. Right? Remember that quote I wrote, one of my posts which I put up ever so often, is that arrogance yells, do you know who I am? And self-confidence whispers, I know who I am. And that's important. So they just, hopefully, I know it's a brief answer, but hopefully that addresses your question. As long as you know at the bottom of your heart that if you wanted to, you could give a really smart answer, but you're choosing not to because it goes against your values, it goes against who you are as a person, then just knowing that is enough, because you are enough. You need to fill yourself up with self-confidence, because then the urge or the desire to prove something to someone else diminishes. There's less space to worry about what others think because you filled yourself up with self-esteem. Okay? The next strategy is to actually let the person know that you've recognized their sarcasm and you don't appreciate it. So you need to start speaking up. There are two ways to do that. Okay? So basically, when a person is sarcastic, instead of turning a blind eye and turning a deaf ear and just ignoring them and just laughing it off, I know a lot of people who just give polite laughs and hope that the person gets the hint. But you know what? Sarcastic people rarely get the hint. So I'm a big believer in if the opportunity is right, then you need to speak up. And there are two ways to speak up. You can use humor or you can be more direct. And that depends on the situation, that depends on the person you're speaking to, and that depends on what's at stake. I can't tell you about those things because each individual situation will be different. But when you come across a sarcastic person, you really need to consider these three things: the situation that's at hand, what's at stake, and who you're dealing with. Now I'm going to show you how you can use humor when you're dealing with a really nasty, sarcastic person. And you can use this sentence of mine by all means. It always works for me, and it still helps me keep the mood fairly lighthearted. But the sarcastic person gets the point that I have recognized their sarcasm and I'm not standing for it. I'll give you an example. I once went to this really glittery, big, fancy social event. And while I was there, I met this really obnoxious person who had this really weird sense of humor and who was going around socializing and saying really nasty things about people to their face. Now, because a lot of the people were really stunned and taken aback, they had no clue how to handle his sarcasm. So a lot of them were pretending like they didn't understand it, or they were just laughing apologetically, or they were just ignoring him. So basically, he was on like a freight train and couldn't be stopped, and he just went around cracking really, really rude jokes to the people he was talking to. And then, of course, he meets me, and we were introduced, and he says something quite obnoxious, quite rude. He thought he was being funny, but it was quite toxic, some of the comments. Now, I'm not someone who will keep quiet for the sake of it, right? I will keep quiet only as a strategy, for a strategic reason. And I felt that that was a moment where, you know, he had created unleashed a lot of damage already, spoken to a lot of people in a very derogatory manner, and it was just not on. But I did not want to create any bad blood. I still wanted to keep the atmosphere fairly light, you know. So I decided to use humor. So when he said something really, you know, sarcastic to me, I just smiled at him and I said, look, I don't endorse this particular brand of sarcasm. Do you have any other brand? That's all I said. I don't endorse this particular brand of sarcasm. Do you have any other brand? And you know what? He was so taken aback. He hadn't a clue what to say. But because I was smiling and because I made it sound really funny, which it was in a way, he burst out laughing and he said, oh, okay, have I been saying a little bit too much? And I said, yes, you have. So it really boils down to body language. If you use humor to let a sarcastic person know that they are being rude and they are crossing a line, then you don't end up making enemies, but at the same time you let the sarcastic person know, please, it's time to back off. So I suggest wherever possible, use humor to let the other person know that what they're doing is not correct. But we need to start speaking up, guys, because if we don't, the sarcastic person, poor thing, is completely clueless what they're doing. I mean, sometimes, of course, they're doing it deliberately. But for the large part, if we don't stop them, they start thinking it's okay. All right, so use humor. And the other way to let them know that you don't appreciate sarcasm is to be more direct. So, for example, when I choose to be direct, I let the other person know. I say something like, look, I get the feeling that you are being sarcastic, but sarcasm is not something I understand or appreciate. So it will be a lot easier for both of us if you can choose to be more direct when speaking with me. Do you see how effective something like that can be? I don't frown when I'm saying it, and my body language is still relaxed and positive, but I'm firm and I'm direct. And I'm letting them know that I'm someone who understands sarcasm straight away, right? I know it. I get it. I know when people are giving me a backhanded compliment, but I'm not saying everyone can do that. So if you sometimes just have this suspicion that someone is being sarcastic with you, but you don't quite understand what they're saying, let them know that in a direct manner. Say what I just said, which is, I get the sense, I get the feeling that you are trying to be sarcastic, but sarcasm is something I don't understand. It's not something I appreciate. So it might make communication a whole lot easier between us if you choose to be a little bit more direct. And every single time I've said that to the person, they have changed their style of communication because they felt bad that that's how they were coming across, right? So I would choose to be direct or humorous, but we need to start speaking up more with people who are being sarcastic, because otherwise they're not going to change and you're going to be very, very unhappy. The last strategy is to learn the lesson. Now, very often when people are sarcastic, there is actually a grain of truth in that sarcasm. And we don't want to acknowledge that truth because we don't like acknowledging our own flaws. Many times if a spouse, a boss, an in-law is sarcastic with us, there is a little bit that is 100% true that we need to change or that we need to improve. But because it is masked as sarcasm, we only listen to the tone and we get irritated with the rolling eyes and the tone, but we forget the actual content, right? This is because so many people are going through life with the central goal that I should never be offended by anyone and no one should ever say anything rude to me. I think the core goal needs to be, how can I evolve into the person I was meant to become? How can I be a little bit better than who I was yesterday? And you can only become that when you wear the hat of the eternal student, when you approach every situation from a student's perspective. What can I learn from this situation, from this interaction, from this experience? So while the sarcastic person and their barbs definitely can hurt us, I've already given you some strategies to deal with them, but it is equally important to put our egos aside. And the human ego, honestly, is such an overworked entity. There is no one as overworked as the human ego. So I always tell all my clients, please tell your ego to go on a short holiday. You don't need their company for the time being. You can manage completely without them. Because honestly, yes, the human ego has its place for your survival and for you to thrive, but for the large part, it does create a lot of misery for you. Okay? And because the human ego is so active and overworked, it constantly pops up when we hear criticism or when we hear sarcasm. We only focus on the tone. How dare he speak to me like that? How dare she roll her eyes? But we forget to learn the lesson that's embedded. Okay? So the last strategy was to put your ego aside. And when you have some time to yourself to reflect on that sarcasm that you may have experienced earlier in the day and think about it from an objective, logical perspective to see if there's anything you can do to improve that flaw that the sarcastic person may have pointed out to you. They're wrong to be sarcastic, but from our own perspective, it's so important to keep growing, to keep evolving, and to be self-aware of our own flaws. Okay? Now, the last section, which I promised to everyone, was, now if you happen to be the sarcastic person that I've been talking about for the last 30 minutes, I did say at the start that there is hope, right? Because sarcasm is a learned skill often, and therefore anything that is learned can be unlearned. So if you, any of you watching this feels that you tend to be sarcastic at times, I want to explain to you how you can overcome that. Now, a long time ago, I worked with this lady who used to go around really being sarcastic to everyone who asked her any question. And then one day I asked her, why do you have this compulsion? Why are you constantly being nasty when someone asks you, these questions? And you know what she said to me? She said, Nim, you know what? If they ask a stupid question, they get a sarcastic answer. And I thought, ouch, that's a bit cruel. Okay. Now, sarcastic people often are impatient. They don't suffer fools gladly. They often think that that's a dumb question. I don't have the time to answer such stupid questions. Why? Because I'm so great, I'm so superior, blah, 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 blah. But I need you to recognize that every person you meet has something to teach you. Maybe they have nothing to teach you in the things you're good at, but they're definitely good at something that you have no clue about, that you're absolutely mediocre in. Whenever I meet someone new for the first time, I always think, okay, they're not they can't write like me, or they can't speak, professionally like me, blah, 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 that's fine. But I'm sure that they are masters at something that I'm terrible at, and that means I have so much to learn from them. If they ask me a question about my field, about my industry, which I think is a really stupid or obvious question, that's because I have been dealing with that topic for a long time, and it's natural that I'll think that these things are something everyone should know. But if someone is approaching that same topic from the perspective of a first-timer, they're not going to know anything about it, and of course their question is going to sound silly and stupid to you. So people who find this compulsive need to be sarcastic with other people, I want you to take a moment and think about your triggers. Now, the reason you're being sarcastic is because you don't know your emotional triggers. What is a trigger? A trigger is a situation which forms a pattern. Over time, the same things trigger you to be sarcastic, and you really need to find out what those triggers are. Maybe when someone asks you the same question that they asked you 50 times before, that's your trigger for irritation, which brings on your sarcasm. Or maybe when someone asks you a question that you think is perfectly obvious, that you think the answer is so easy and so obvious, why are they stupid enough to ask you? Maybe that's your trigger. Or maybe when someone says something about you, maybe they point out a flaw about you that you know secretly is true. Maybe that's your trigger that brings on sarcasm, right? So sarcastic people need to recognize. So by the way, if you know someone who's sarcastic who's not watching this, let them know that they need to be aware of their triggers. Once you know the trigger and that situation pops up, you are better prepared to handle that situation in a more gentle manner. Because if you're not aware of your own emotional triggers, then those same situations keep popping up and you keep being sarcastic and you just ruin your relationships. I know a lot of sarcastic people think it's better to be sarcastic than to come right out and be direct. They think they're protecting the relationships. But trust me, research has shown that sarcasm ruins relationships. It's much better to be direct, but be direct gently. Be direct without hurting people's feelings, right? So know your emotional triggers, that's the first thing. And the second thing is, every time you get the urge to be sarcastic to someone you care about, sarcastic to anyone, even if it's someone you don't care about, every time you get the urge to say something mean, remind yourself that sarcasm is the weapon of the cowardly. Only cowards choose to use sarcasm because they have not developed the skills to have influential conversations. When you have the ability to get your point across without making the other person feel like a fool, you don't need to clutch at straws. You don't need to look for a smart aleck comment to make the other person feel dumb or stupid. Okay? So whenever you have the sense, you find yourself about to say something that's super smart, super cool, but super rude, remind yourself that that's just the cowardly way out. A more dignified way to deal with a conversation is to recognize that we're all equal, that we all bring something to the table, that everyone is really smart in something and really dumb in other things. Just because they're not smart at the same things that you're smart in doesn't mean they're dumb. So recognizing this is super important, and whenever you have the option, choose to be a brave person who has brave conversations rather than a cowardly person. Because like I say, and I'm going to say this in conclusion, we can change the world together. We can make it a positive place, one uplifting conversation at a time, not one insult at a time. Okay? So we are in this together. We're all good at some things and we're really bad at other things. We need to respect the fact that people are not going to be good at the same things you're good at. It doesn't negate them as a person. They're still people in their own rights. And we need to change this world one uplifting conversation at a time. Unfortunately, sarcastic people think that they are making the world a better place one insult at a time. It doesn't work like that. Trust me, sarcasm has no positive consequences, only long-term negative ones. So it's super important to recognize that. Wow, that was that took a lot out of me, because it's a topic that has troubled me for so long, because I meet so many people who are so sad because of the sarcastic people around them, and it really hurts my soul to see them suffer in that manner. But I feel their pain because I was like that once. You know, I used to let people's opinions of me crush me, and many a tear has been shed. But I chose deliberately to develop a strategy. It's not just about developing a thick skin, it's about developing a proper strategy. Unfortunately, I'm not able to cover all the points I typically teach. As you know, I do the jump starter session for my clients, and I do cover all these in depth, but because I had 30 minutes and I've gone way overboard today, and I really wanted to give you value, I've tried to cover the main points, and hopefully it helps you. So please, yes, by all means, ignore the sarcastic person as much as you can if that's what you want to. But remember, it is not a great long-term strategy. We need to start speaking up more so that sarcastic people are aware of the damage they're unleashing. And the more people that speak up politely, gently, without burning bridges, the more positive this universe will be. And that's all we can ask for. This journey from birth to death, make it as positive as possible, and let's be the flag bearers. If no one else has ever done it before you, why not you? Why not begin with you? Okay? Next time you meet a sarcastic person, or you yourself feel the need to be sarcastic, remind yourself there's a better way to say it. So hopefully you've all enjoyed today's session. I certainly have. I'm super glad I've covered this topic. Don't forget this wonderful exercise I did with you. Ta-da! The shells and the sand. The shells stand for your self-esteem, and the sand stands for all the insults and the mocking comments that come your way. Remind yourself of that exercise. Love you all, and have a wonderful week ahead. Have a sarcasm-free week ahead. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time for the next Sunday Chats with Nim. Bye for now.